Bore da, a chroeso i Pwyllgor Archwilio Iechyd a Gofal Digidol Cymru. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Digital Healthcare Wales's Audit and Assurance Committee meeting. I'm planning to finish today's public session by about 12:30 at the latest. It may be before then. So we're hoping to take a short break before we move into our private session, which is scheduled to start at 12:40. And we'll also be taking a short break between sections 5 and 6 of today's agenda. You'll note that the agenda includes the audited accounts and annual report, which are normally presented at a separate extraordinary meeting. But due to timings this year, however, we have agreed to include them within our standard quarterly meeting for endorsement to the board on the 25th of July of this year. So I'd like specifically to welcome Diana Stroyer, who is a Financial Director of Comken, who is observing in her capacity as shadowing independent members. Welcome Nathan Couch, Audit Wales, for his committee update, and he'll be joined by Mike Whitley and David Tomlin to present the Audit Wales reports and the audit of the financial statements. Welcome Sian Williams, Head of Financial Services and Reporting, who'll be supporting Claire Osmondson-Little in Mark Cox's absence, and Angela Hadgett, Head of Organisational Performance, who'll be joining us later to respond to the audit review for data quality. We are holding this meeting virtually via MS Teams, and as is customary, it is being recorded, and the recording will be presented and posted on DHCW's website. And as usual, today's committee papers can be accessed by the public via our website. Now, apologies. We have apologies for absence from the Associate Director of Finance, Mark Cox, but I think otherwise we have a full house. Let's move on to declarations of interest. I've not been notified of any conflicts. Can I just check whether there are any declarations of interest that anyone would want to note with regard to anything on today's agenda? I can't see any, so thank you. We'll move then to part 2 of today's agenda, which is the consent agenda. Now, we have a full agenda, so I'm assuming that we've all had the opportunity to read the papers beforehand. And to ensure that we focus on business critical activity and on key areas, we are using the consent agenda for this meeting. Can I just check whether there are any issues with that? I can't see anything. So if not, then I conclude that colleagues are happy to approve and note all items as requested. For the record, then, we are approving item 2.1, the minutes from the committee meetings held on the 16th of April, both public and private abridged minutes, and the extraordinary meeting of the 9th of May of this year. We are noting the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership Committee Assurance Report, item 2.2. We are noting the contents of the forward work plan, that's item 2.3, including items scheduled to come to future committee meetings. We are approving 2 policies, that's item 2.4, the quality policy and the integrated management system policy. We are noting that there are no losses and special payments to report, but I'd just like to confirm with Claire that that is still the position to date. Claire? Thank you. And we are noting the standards of behaviour report, which is item 2.6, noting the current compliance rate of 96% for staff banded 8A+. And lastly, we are noting the Welsh Health Circular Report, item 2.7. Diolch yn fawr, thank you, and we'll now move on to the main agenda, which is section 3. And we'll start with the action log, and you'll see from the log that there is one action captured from our committee meeting on the 16th of April, which I am pleased to note is complete. Can I just check whether there are any queries in relation to the action marked as complete? Diolch yn fawr. We are therefore being asked to note the status of the action log, which we do, and we turn then to part 4 of today's agenda, and to the internal audit progress report. And I will now hand over to Stephen Cheney, who's interim head of internal audit from the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership, to take us through the progress report, which includes a summary of progress made in this current financial year to date. Stephen, croeso.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everyone. The progress report is a summary of work completed to date, but it also provides a brief overview of work that we've commenced from 24-25. In essence, it's confirmation that we've finished and finalised the remaining work from 23-24, which is used to inform our annual audit opinion. We're also making significant progress with 24-25. We have, at the time of writing, we have 3 in progress, but actually we're very close to drawing 2 of those to a conclusion as well. So we're moving forward with our work. As with previous committees as well, I shall go through each of the reports that are presented to this committee in turn, and if I may, I shall stop after each one and invite any questions at all. So the first one on the list is data quality. This is a reasonable assurance review. It's intended to be a sort of self-contained review over a sample of performance metrics that are reported to the board. It's intended to provide assurance over the accuracy of those metrics by reviewing the source data that's in place. This is a typical audit that we do across the majority of our clients to provide that level of assurance over key performance information. It was intended to be a relatively small self-contained review. However, as DHW are quite advanced with real-time reporting and have a series of automated processes in place, it was actually very difficult to retrospectively review the source data for the sample that we selected. We were able to do it for approximately 1/3 of our sample, which we verified and we were very happy with, subject to a couple of small points. But overall, it was very difficult to do that for the remaining sample. As such, we looked at the controls in place to ensure the quality of that data as it's reported on a monthly basis. And we were able to do some testing around that. However, we did raise a couple of recommendations, one of which was sort of documenting that process. It's quite a technical setup from start to finish, using a lot of automated processes within Office 365 and Power BI that, in terms of succession planning or business continuity arrangements, there's certainly a benefit to capturing that information. So that's one of the key recommendations coming out from that. Also, there may be requirements under some of the ISO accreditations to retain some of that data that's used within the information, whether it be a snapshot or a collection. So we've raised a recommendation over that as well. So whilst it didn't turn out in the way that we had hoped, we've provided a level of assurance. We are also planning to pick this up in much more detail within performance framework, which is scheduled for 24-25, and actually it's a relatively early review. We'll be engaging with our IT audit team to assist with the technical process, and we also use data analysts within audit assurance as well, so we'll be drawing upon their expertise as well to provide a more comprehensive overview of that process. However, we've provided reasonable assurance, very comfortable with what's been done, some recommendations to take forward, but yes, overall very, very happy with that. So welcome any questions at all.
Thank you. I'll turn to Claire first of all then for your response. Diolch.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, good report. And actually, throughout the report, there were a couple of items that they picked up on that we will take back into the performance team. Some of that was rounding, so we were rounding up instead of rounding down in our some of our HR stats. No material effect overall, but actually a good spot on their part. So again, we took that back to the performance and to the pod team, and we'll certainly sharpen our attention in that respect. And yeah, I think it's systematic of where we are. The data is real time, and therefore capturing it at a snapshot is proving more challenging than previously would have been. So really helpful report, and some outcomes that we will take back and resolve going forward. So thanks, Stephen.
Diolch, Claire. I can't see any other hands up. As you say, Stephen, it's an early review, and you're going to be picking up this again further in your performance framework work as we move forward in this current financial year. So thank you for that. If there aren't any further comments, then I'll ask you to pick up the next review. Diolch.
Thank you. The next review is entitled Follow-up of High Priority Recommendations. This is an annual piece of work that we do. It provides a degree of assurance over DHCW's ability and desire to address recommendations and the process therein to do so. So it's been a very positive review in the past, and this year's no exception again. As with previous related reports, that there is strong control in place. The process is very thorough. Recommendations are managed well, and they are addressed by and large promptly as well. So it's certainly very positive overall. We did raise a couple of recommendations over some accuracy points within the log, and also a consideration of how third-party recommendations may be tracked going forward, particularly where some of the responsibility at least sits outside of the control of the HCW. It's how assurance is gained over their responsibility and deliverables as well. So hopefully a couple of useful recommendations, but again, overall, very positive position there as well. And again, I welcome any questions.
Diolch, Stephen. And I will turn now to our board secretary, Chris Darling, who's going to respond to that review. Diolch, Chris.
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, it was a helpful follow-up review, and I think it gives us a few areas to tighten up on. I think the point we've talked about before through this committee, the processes are really important, but it's also important for us to make sure we get a culture of continuous learning. And I think Ruth's picked up the point at previous audit committees. The process bit is important, the recommendation follow through is important, but how we embed some of the learning and the themes, not just from the internal audit, but from Audit Wales and other reviews, external reviews we have, is something I think we're continuously working on. So really helpful report, but yeah, for me, it's the organisational learning element as well that's important, that I think sits alongside this.
Thank you, Chris. Diolch. And it certainly speaks well to our continuous improvement, which, as you signalled, is very, very important to DHCW, and it's really helpful for this committee to get the assurance that we're in a positive position. Diolch. I can't see any other hands up, so Stephen, perhaps you'll take us through the next review then. Diolch.
Thank you. The next review is decarbonisation, and this is a piece of work that we've done across the entirety of Wales. Every organisation, more or less, we've undertaken this review, and across Wales as a whole, it probably hasn't come out particularly well because of the financial pressures, the age of the estate, other conflicting priorities against the timeline required. in the case of the HCW, it's certainly much more positive. As an organisation, the expectation is to reach that target of net zero carbon, and the plan envisages achieving that as well. This is at odds with what we found elsewhere, where the plan isn't to achieve that target by 2030. And a large part of this is, as I said, it's just the financial commitments and the level of investment required. So DHCW is in quite a unique position. There is as I mentioned, forecast achievement of the carbon reduction targets for DHCW. This is achieved through the Decarbonisation Action Plan. DHCW, as mentioned, benchmarking well against other organisations. There has been a benefit from a change in emissions methodology, and we've raised recommendation around that just to agree the use of that approach going forward. But putting that aside, DHCW is expecting to hit its targets. There is a plan in place, and they are using or trying to use a range of different approaches to reduce that emissions target. Very innovative and creative with some of them, but and this leads into the high priority recommendation. It's that overall funding strategy. So the more significant projects, the funding may or may not be available. If it's a capital investment project, then new standards of build would incorporate quite a large element of these requirements regarding carbon emissions reduction. However, on an ongoing basis, the funding is much more restrictive or competitive. There's a bidding process as and when, and on an ad hoc basis. So whilst DHCW, as we would expect, is bidding for the funding as and when it becomes available for small pockets of initiatives, there isn't really, and it's not necessarily a fault of DHCW, there's no long-term strategy in place to achieve funding going forward, in a nutshell, where the money will come from to achieve its ambitions. And that's a consistent point all across Wales, or all throughout Wales. And hence the recommendation within the report. But in spite of that, it is certainly a very positive position compared to other NHS Wales organisations. So, welcome any questions.
Diolch yn fawr, Stephen. That's very pleasing to hear. Shall I turn first of all then to Julie Ash, who's living and breathing this every day. Perhaps it'd be helpful to have your feedback, and then we'll turn to other colleagues afterwards. Julie.
Yes, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Stephen. Just to say, we found this review really helpful. We weren't quite sure how it would come out, but I feel it was quite positive. And the recommendations, there were 3 recommendations, again, very helpful, steering us in the right direction. So there was one around just firming up our training requirements, another on the methodology and just making sure that Welsh Government and shared services are comfortable with how that's being used. And finally, the third one, which was the funding position, which we'll take on board and develop some plans for. But I'd just like to thank Internal Audit for the review and learning we've taken from it. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Julie. That's really helpful to hear. I'll turn now then to Alistair.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Stephen. Very interesting to read your comments. I wondered if you've seen, Stephen, any correlation between improvement in our decarbonisation and increased home working. Is the latter directly supporting the former? And just on your wider experience, Stephen, there's quite a lot of broader discussion about the much higher carbon footprint of AI support and servers that might well be located across the Atlantic. And I just wondered, it's not clearly related to the current position, but it always helps to be able to think just a little bit ahead. that it does seem to be blowing out of the water a lot of targets that organizations have been setting and coming at them, from a less than expected planning perspective. So I just wondered if you had any early indications of that in any of your other experience. Just those two queries, if I may.
Thank you, Alistair. If I may, I shall pick up the homeworking point first. Yes, there's no doubt about it. It has had an impact, but one of the significant contributors towards the carbon target is the procurement process. And when I say procurement process, I'm referring to procurement of services, products all across Wales. It's by far the biggest net contributor. Some of the other organisations, and same with DHW as well, actually, is in excess of 60% of emissions. So even with homeworking being a large factor in elements of the reduction, it still plays a relatively small part in that sense, but it's still a very important part. So we have seen considerable movement as a result of people not travelling into the office much more. One of the other things that DHW has done is rationalise the estate, so people are travelling to one office rather than multiple offices, and the benefits that go with maintaining less estate as well. That's had some benefit. There have been initiatives around LED lighting, which have taken place, and again, that's had a cumulative effect. So it's been a combination of different factors, but homeworking certainly has made a sizable difference in that sense. But overall, I think the reduction in travel between sites has had a significant benefit as well. But the procurement process as a whole is certainly a large contributor towards the emissions targets as well. Even more so with health boards in particular, because of the procurement of medicines from various countries. That has quite a large impact. But yes, certainly there has been a benefit. Regarding the AI point, it's quite difficult to say. Certainly with DHW, one of the largest aspects we were considering within this review was the data centres themselves and the renewable technology that's in place of solar panels, where that's being used to achieve that. With our other clients across Wales, there is an element of it, and whether it's a significant one in DHW, I'm not sure. The honest answer is I don't know what the level of impact AI will have, but certainly from a data centre perspective, we focus quite heavily upon that, the estate, the use of energy as part of that, which would in turn link into AI, because the hardware would be required to run the software. And we focused on that, and even taking that into account, we were still expecting to hit DHW was still expecting to hit the target by 2030 and onwards. So I would say the impact of DHW at this point in time has not had a significant impact overall. Going forward, it may very well be different as more hardware is required to automate processes further. Whether that's a short-term thing, I'm not entirely sure. I suspect it's probably a medium to longer-term impact of it, I hazard, I guess. So appreciate it doesn't quite answer your question, Alistair, but hopefully it's some help.
That's very helpful, Stephen. Thank you. And finally, I'll turn to Claire Osmond.
I'll be brief. I think, first of all, thank you, Stephen. I think it reflects the importance that CO2 has within DHW and how we rank against the other health boards and trusts. That was assuring for us, because to be honest with you, when we stepped into the CO2 journey back a couple of years ago, it was, we had to educate ourselves on how to measure and how to track it. So we've come a long way. And that was reflected recently in the NHS Sustainability Conference, where two of our staff presented and actually were nominated for an award. But I think it shows that we are proactive. I think what that conference challenged our thinking is, are we challenging enough? And what is our system role in using digital as Alistair actually highlighted, to mitigate and reduce carbon across the system, and how, as part of our benefits process, are we capturing that? So I think that was quite thought-provoking. So it's actually, for me, started another wave of thinking about how can DHEW play a more system role and really identify areas that we can use and adopt, and technologies that we can adopt to further reduce the carbon footprint for all of Wales. But thank you, Stephen. It was really assuring, that report, and well done to Julie and the team for all the hard work that underpins that in getting us there. Thanks, Chair.
Diolch, Claire, for those supportive comments, and really good to hear about the internal challenge as well, in terms of our role to keep on challenging as a system leader. Diolch. And finally then, Chris Darling.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And sorry, I just wanted to make one quick point. Claire triggered something in my mind. It was just across NHS Wales, over the last 12 months, there have been significantly more limited assurance reports from internal audit across the board. I don't have the exact stats, I can't remember, but Stephen will be able to tell us. And I think some of that is a reflecting of the financial situation we're in. I think this report really demonstrates that. You know, we've helpfully got a recommendation around our investment strategy relating to decarbonisation. But I think we were one of the few organisations that didn't come out with a limited assurance report. And I think it's probably just worth reflecting that in terms of consideration of the board, some of the priorities and the difficult decisions that are having to be made both by us and across the wider system.
Diolch, Chris. I'll bring this discussion to a close. That's a really good point. Just pleasing to note the reasonable assurance. It's a very positive and helpful report, and heartening actually to see us benchmarking so well against colleagues in other NHS Wales organisations. So making good progress towards the delivery of our decarbonisation action plan. We will escalate, I think, to board the high priority recommendation in terms of developing a funding strategy. Julie has referenced that there are developmental plans already in place to go down that avenue. So thank you for that, Stephen. Very much appreciate. And then finally, we have the last review, if you'll take us through that.
Thank you. If I may, because it does link into this a bit as well, picking up on Chris's point about the number of limited assurance reports, he is absolutely correct that this year and last year as well, there certainly has been an increase across NHS Wales, reflecting the financial difficulties, service delivery difficulties as well. And if I had to put a figure to it, it's probably around about 15% as an average, maybe up to 20% of reports as limited. It's it depends upon organisations. Some are less than others, depending upon the services they offer. But it is certainly higher than it has been in previous years, and I think it's just reflecting the environment that organisations are working within. So I thought that would be a useful clarification point as well. Excellent. And leading on to the next report, the final report, the financial and service delivery sustainability. And this is a key area. We undertake this work across the majority of our clients as well, because it is such a key topic at the moment around delivering a service whilst remaining financially sustainable. We undertook a review of the arrangements in place to achieve that. So more focus around, is DHEW doing as much as it can within the constraints that exist, and overall we found that to be the case. There is a break-even position, which is in the current environment is certainly very positive. And in turn, they can evidence that financial balance, management of the budgetary allocations, and also the risks to achieve a balanced budget. They're captured, they're monitored through the risk management process, which we confirmed through the corporate risk register. So the steps that we would expect to be in place, balanced budget and the management of risks that may challenge that position, is exactly what we would expect to see. We also found effective oversight as well by the management and the board itself. raised several recommendations, nothing overly significant. Maybe tighten up around some of the information that's reported to between the various groups and the board itself, and and a view over the escalation process as well, following the development of the current governance structures in place. But overall, there are established procedures in place for controlling the funding of project program development, delivery and management of the services or service delivery, effective structures in place for that as well. And the oversight of this activity is structured, and we find matters can be escalated as and when required. And whilst we raised a small point around a couple of documents to be updated, it was generally a very positive review overall, not least projecting to achieve a balanced position. So very positive, certainly.
Yes, Stephen, that's very good to hear that it's such a positive outcome. And again, as you say, overall reasonable assurance. Claire, I know you want to come in on this. Is your responsibility?
Yeah, obviously, yes. Core to my future in DHEW is solving the sustainability funding nut. No, I thought it was really good, really informative, and it's actually raised issues about the timeliness, and Paul's on the call here, about people reviewing their policies and ensuring that they're up to date and approved. And we have a monitor that we take to management board, and we will be on Thursday, which shows which areas need to sharpen up on. And again, that's something that we do need to address. So yeah, I thought it was an informative audit, and yeah, we'll take forward those actions, Stephen, and implement them. Thank you.
Diolch, Claire. Thank you for those positive responses. And I'll now invite Ruth Glazard, Vice Chair of DHCW, to comment.
Diolch, Marion, bore da. I always get a little bit nervous when I see recommendations which talk about information hasn't flowed to the board in a consistent way, and actually management team are looking at different things. And that was obviously one of the recommendations that you found, Stephen. I mean, I think I gain quite a lot of assurance from the fact that our DG&S committee is all over the detail in a way that the board doesn't necessarily have to be, and that's why we have a strong committee structure. But I'd just be interested in kind of your view on those findings. And I naturally think that there wasn't a deliberate attempt to present different information to management board than to main board, and it's just something about how the flow of the information comes through the committees. Would that be correct?
Yes, I think from our perspective, it's probably worth mentioning when we undertake an audit, we probably look at thousands and thousands of pages of documents to draw our conclusions. And this, I suppose this is a problem with when reporting by exception or raising recommendations by exception, is trying to counterbalance it with the positives. So that might be one instance that we've come across, compared to thousands of others where it's been absolutely fine. So it's, from our perspective, certainly no cause for concern. If we found significant discrepancies with what was being reported, either accidentally or otherwise, it would be a very different position with the report overall. It's just a small example. There's always a degree of mitigation risk to a lower level as possible. You can only go so far before human error might creep in, or other factors might account for it. Everything that we would expect to be done is being done. And if I were to be asked the question, would you have a different view based upon the information that's come through? You wouldn't. It would be entirely consistent overall. It was just an isolated incident.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yes, Stephen. So an isolated incident and no particular cause for concern. So thank you for that. And one final comment then, or question from Alistair.
Just a quick one, Marion, and just to the last point, sitting as an independent member of the board, I feel very well informed about the financial position and the outlook as we move forward. And I don't have a concern that there is a lack of challenge at the board around questions relating to that. And those two matters are really important to me. So it's really just, that point of assurance. I think it's there's a lot of assurance that we get at the board level. And I say that with a broader private sector and public sector awareness. I think I'm impressed by the level of openness and challenge that we have at that level in terms of our finances. So just on that point to Stephen's issue. Thank you.
Diolch, Alistair. Good to bring the discussion on a positive note. And I know Claire wants to pitch in for one final comment before I draw this discussion to a close. Claire.
Yeah, so we are currently looking at our IQPR, which is our performance report, which is currently around about 150 odd pages every month, to try and rationalise the KPIs that we are putting together, so that we can get so we can see more the wood from the trees. So I think actually part of the volume of data we've got and the timing of that data, of when it's available, it is challenging. So I think together with Angela and the performance team, we are looking at how we can rationalise some of those KPIs, which should sharpen them up, because there's been a common theme through some of those audit reports, all of them actually, about sharpness of data, accuracy of data, and completeness. So I think that by rationalising the volume that we do produce and having a more appropriate and relevant KPI underpinning that, I think that will help going forward. So I do think these reports help us to look in the mirror and actually think, certainly in cyber is a good example actually. The cyber team are working with the performance team to try, if you look at our performance report, there's an awful lot in there on cyber to try and bring it a bit more relevant and more focused, so that we can make more informed decisions actually. But yeah, great, helpful report. Thank you, Stephen.
Diolch, Claire. So to bring this discussion to a close then, thank you, Simon, clearly for very, very helpful reports, which we are receiving for assurance. And I think very pleasing to note that the three reasonable assurance, we've talked about funding issues impacting and delivering a greater number of limited assurance audits across NHS Wales. So pleasing to see these three reasonable assurance against today. So diolch yn fawr, Stephen. We will move on now then, colleagues, to the next agenda item, which is the Head of Internal Audit opinion. And I shall invite Stephen Cheney to present the audit opinion, which we are being asked to receive for assurance. Diolch, Stephen.
Thank you. If I may just very quickly, sorry to bring up the report again. I mentioned the data quality one, I'm sure I did, as reasonable assurance. We didn't apply an assurance rating in the end.
No,
I just want to correct that. It's because at the back of my mind, I knew that it was relatively positive what we were saying. Thank you. And before I start, I just wanted to thank thank a few people, Chris, Laura, and Claire, the rest of the team as well, in helping to get everything over the line at the year end, so we can issue this final Head of Audit opinion. So certainly very, very grateful for that. As previously reported, the opinion itself, it contributes to the assurance available to the accountable officer and thus the board. The final opinion remains consistent with the draft position previously reported, which is that of reasonable assurance. Together with the reports presented to this committee, as I mentioned, this concludes our reporting for 2023-24. But of course, conclusions, risks, and other knowledge from our work will continue to feature going forward as well. So it's not forgotten about. It's probably worth mentioning. It's certainly a very positive opinion overall as reasonable assurance. It's been a slight movement on the number of substantial assurance reports from what we issued during 22-23. This is as expected. we've moved into more auditing and providing assurance over operational matters this year. So we would expect as the organisation moves forward that there will be more challenges coming on board and risks to manage. So it's certainly in line with expectations and not a reflection of deterioration within DHW. So it's very positive. We didn't provide any limited assurance reports at all, which in itself is encouraging. And certainly with the reports that we do raise and recommendations, we see actions being addressed very quickly as well. So we take a lot of confidence there. But just to finish off, it's reasonable assurance overall from our perspective, and a very comfortable reasonable assurance, and certainly very positive as well. So so welcome any questions or queries over that, but that's pretty much all I want to say really on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. That's really very, very positive. And I will turn to our Executive Director of Finance to respond to that opinion. Diolch, Claire.
So that's really great, and thank you, Stephen. I know the way we phase these audit reports during the year is always challenging. And just to assure the board, actually yesterday we had our performance review with shared services. So they review our performance and their performance in relation to the internal audit function. And in that, actually, we were amber, actually, in the way that we turn around the audit reports. So we have a target of turning around our responses to Stephen in 15 days, I think. So we were 2% below where we should be at 80. I put that down to year end and the fact we did have quite a few at the year end, but it works. It really is about how we work together once we get the reports, that we action those reports in a timely manner, and actually that we get those actions through the audit committee at a time for us. What is pleasing about that is actually there was only 3 organisations that were green and 2 that were yellow, and actually the variation in that turnaround was huge across Wales. So I think that's systematic of the working relationship we have with yourselves in terms of the time in the plan and turning those audit reports and findings into the way that we work through the quality team as well. So a good set of audits, some good learning in there as well for us, but it's also helpful for us to understand where we are in relation to the rest of Wales, so that we can calibrate our ambition. So thank you for all your hard work and for the opinion, which just reinforces, I think, the processes that we have in place together. So thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. I'm hopeful that this coming year we'll have a more sort of linear profile of delivery. We've already made a head start on a number of audits, and I think certainly looking at around about Christmas last year, we were well on track to a good delivery of audits. We had a challenge in sort of tail end Q3, Q4. Which certainly impacted. We would be more hopeful this year of, as I said, having a consistent delivery of audits throughout the year, so we don't put you under pressure as well to turn audits around. So certainly some points for us to pick up going forward, but we are trying to gain a head start this year as much as possible to make it easier into Q3 and 4. So I think it's worth mentioning that.
Diolch, Stephen, and thank you for your work throughout the last year, and for presenting the final audit opinion, which, as you say, is consistent with the draft opinion you presented to us several weeks ago. So diolch yn fawr, thank you. That brings me nicely then on to our next agenda item, which is the Audit Wales Committee update, and I will now invite Nathan Couch, the Head of Performance Audit at Audit Wales, to present this update report. Bore da, Nathan, croeso.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So yeah, this is the routine progress update from Audit Wales, which sets out our current and planned accounts and performance audit work at DHCW. It also provides additional information on other relevant examinations and studies published by the Auditor General and relevant corporate documents published by Audit Wales. Just to take the accounts update to start off with, is really brief, just to say that our audit of the 23-24 financial statements is complete and will be presented by my colleagues Mike and David later in the agenda. In terms of our performance audit work, our core structured assessment work for 2024 is underway and focuses on the usual areas of governance and leadership, systems of assurance, planning and financial management. Field work is progressing well and is nearly complete, and we're aiming to present the report at the next Audit and Assurance Committee in October. Our deep dive review of cost savings is underway, and we intend to present the report for that as well at, to the meeting in October. And then our deep dives on digital and our local review on stakeholder engagement arrangements remain in the scoping phase and will be completed later on in the year. Finally, then, exhibits 3 and 4 in the update provide links to the other relevant examination studies published by the Auditor General and additional information published by Audit Wales since the last committee update. And that's it. So happy to take any questions.
Diolch, Nathan. Thank you. That's a very clear update on where we are in terms of progress. And also thank you for those links to those wider audits, which are very, very helpful in terms of our learning. Chris, our Board Secretary, I'll turn to you next.
Thank you, Marion. Yeah, just a couple of points. One, on the stakeholder engagement, we've tried to dovetail this in with the independent review we're undertaking. So we're working closely with Nathan and the team to make sure that's as coordinated as possible. We've recently had, as in this week, some of the initial feedback that Atos, the independent organisation who had undertaken that work, have done. So we're on track, I think, for August, as we had discussed, and then we can follow that up with Audit Wales to make sure that informs their review. And I was just going to comment on welcoming the October target date for structured assessment feedback. I think it'll be nice to have it slightly earlier in the year. This year, the last couple of years, we've had it relatively late, and then it's been pushed on to January, March. So I think it'll be really, really helpful for us to reflect on things slightly ahead of time this year.
Yes, Chris, thank you. And I'd echo that, and I can see the nods around the table as well. It's good to have any learning from that structured assessment as early as possible. So good to hear that you're on target. If there aren't any other comments, diolch, Nathan, for that. We note the Audit Wales update for assurance, and I'll take us on then to the audit action log, and I'll now turn to our Head of Corporate Governance, Laura Tolley, to update us on the current status of the audit action log. Diolch, Laura.
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, so this is the routine audit action log report, and as the committee are aware, following advice from internal audit, one action, depending on a third party, is being managed via a separate log for tracking. So the committee received 3 reports at the last meeting, which contained a total of 8 new actions. All of these have been added to the log, which now contains a total of 29 open actions. 6 of these are going to be reviewed in private, just to due to their sensitive content. And from these actions, 10 are considered complete, and 17 are on target for their completion by their target date. There is, however, one action that's marked as overdue and one that is marked as not on target for completion by the agreed date. These are private actions, though, so they'll be discussed in detail and formal extensions requested in the private section of this meeting. And just to make committee members aware that, you'll note from Stephen's presentation on the internal audit, on the audit tracking, the team are now including management responses on the audit action log, which members can see has been included since the last meeting. And an exercise is underway to add all management responses to open actions on the log, and that should be completed by the next committee meeting, in addition to just sense checking the key information is recorded accurately on the log as well, and that should be completed by the next committee meeting as well. So I'm asking the committee to note the audit action log, and then we'll take the formal extension request in the private section. Diolch.
Diolch, Laura, for that very clear update, and pleasing to hear that you're taking those actions, those recommendations forward in terms of management responses on open actions. I think you've fully updated us, and I can't see any other hands up. So if not, then we note the status of the tracker as outlined by Laura. Diolch yn fawr. And this brings us then to agenda item 4.6, which is the local counter fraud update report. And I shall now invite the head of counter fraud for Cardiff and Vale to present the progress update report relating to the last or the first quarter of this current financial year. Croeso, Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. It's the concise report as usual. This is, as you say, the counter fraud progress report for the first quarter, or just about the first quarter of the year, up until the 25th of June. As per usual, it outlines our areas of work in relation to our infrastructure, promotion, awareness, educational activity, risk, investigations, etc. There's a couple of prevention activities that have taken place on there in relation to bulletins. I won't go through them. There's no issues for DHCW with regard to those and the work that we did with them. The fraud risk profile has been provided, I think, as part of the consent agenda for the private meeting, so members will have had a chance to read that. We haven't had any significant referrals of note during this quarter. We did have one, but there's no issues there in relation to counter fraud, so there's no further action required. The significant salary overpayments dashboard is well up and running now for all NHS Wales organisations. I'm pleased to say that we haven't had any reported through to us, so we get the significant salary overpayments reported as a matter of course to counter fraud, but we haven't had any, so that's positive. And I think really the only thing of main note from the report overall is the positive learning and education that is now taking place within DHCW. E-learning's up to scratch. I think it's by far the best performing organisation in NHS Wales, so that's really good. And we are on the corporate induction agenda at every corporate induction, so that's great as well. So I couldn't be more positive about that, but that's it, and I'll take any questions.
Diolch, Gareth, and really great to end on that positive note. We are doing extremely well in terms of benchmarking against other NHS Wales organisations, as you say, and it's very pleasing to see that, and clearly incorporating the training into our induction processes is working well. So thank you, and thank you for ending on a positive note. Can I just check whether there are any questions or comments from colleagues? I think you've presented your report very clearly and answered all our questions, Gareth. And as you say, you'll be joining us in the private session later on today. Diolch yn fawr. So we are noting the counter fraud update report for assurance, and thanking Gareth for all the work that you're carrying out on our behalf. So I think that brings us to the end of part 4. We're making good time, bang on time actually, so well done, colleagues. And we shall now move on to the part 5 section of today's agenda and the annual financial accounts. Following the annual financial accounts, we take agenda item 5.3, and that will allow any questions regarding the accounts and audit. Before then, we move to our discussion on the annual report. Now, you'll recall that this committee received the draft accounts at our meeting on May the 9th. We reviewed the accounts and we were updated on progress being made in the audit undertaken by Audit Wales. Now, as you'll see, that audit has now been completed and the accounts are here today for our endorsement as a committee to the board. So the annual accounts for 23-24 presented here include the annual accounts for the financial year ending March 31st, and also the letter of representation, which is provided in connection to the audit of the financial statements. So it's my pleasure now to invite our Executive Director of Finance, Claire Osmondson-Little, to present the annual accounts, which we are being asked to note and endorse. Diolch, Claire.
Diolch, Marion. Thank you. And I can't believe that it's our third set of annual accounts. So this is the third year of DHCW. So I'm delighted to have this opportunity to present the audited DHCW final accounts for 23-24. And this is a combination of a significant amount of work over the period, particularly to Sian and the team within finance. So thank you for all your hard work in that arena, but also for the work that we've done much more effectively, I think, this year between ourselves and Audit Wales. So I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank them for working really hard alongside us over the last couple of weeks and months, and that's gone particularly well this year. So we have, I'd like to inform the Audit Committee that we have met all our statutory and administrative financial targets and received an unqualified audit opinion from Audit Wales, reflecting in our annual accounts submission and representing a true and fair view of the financial position for the financial year 2023-24. I'm now going to pass over to Sian, who's done a lot of the hard work, who will take you through some more of the details and highlights the appropriate areas to the committee. Thank you, Sian.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, Chair and Audit Committee. As Marion previously mentioned, these draft accounts were viewed nearly some 2 months ago, and they have now been finalised, and the Audit Committee can view the final accounts for the financial year ended 31st of March 2024 in the annual report on page 151. The main changes since the draft accounts are explained within Audit Wales's Audit of Accounts report, which Mike will present later, a separate report on Audit Wales's finding, also called an ISA 260. Audit Wales have issued an unqualified audit opinion on this year's accounts, pending provision of a signed letter of representation, which is included in Appendix A of paper 5.1, and also included within the ISA 260. As Claire mentioned, we met our statutory financial and administrative duties. So the first financial duty is to remain within the revenue and capital funding envelope. DHCW ended the year with a revenue underspend of 0.307 million. This can be seen in note 2.1. So just want to highlight to the committee the underspend has increased from the draft accounts figure, which was 0.292 million, as DHCW has chosen to make a small non-contentious adjustment from the draft's accounts of £14,000. This is highlighted in Audit Wales report appendix of the ISA 260. Also, DHCW must remain within the capital funding envelope. DHCW ended the year with a 20.408 million spend against the final capital resource limit of 20.427 million, resulting in an underspend of 0.019 million. This can be seen in note 2.2 and has not moved since the draft accounts. Other targets to highlight to the committee is the public sector payment policy. 97% was achieved against the target of 95% of non-NHS invoices paid within 30 days. And that can be seen in note 2.4, and the effective cash management. We managed to end the year with a balance of 2 million, and this can be seen within the cash flow statement. Just as a small reminder to the committee that the annual accounts consist of 5 key summary statements accompanied by 56 pages of published accounting notes. So the statements are the Statement of Comprehensive Net Expenditure, or the SOCNI, which summarises DHCW's net operating costs. The second is the Other Comprehensive Net Expenditure statement, which shows the change in revaluation of the property due to increase in indexation from the Valuation Office. The third is the Statement of Financial Position as at the 31st of March 2024. This is what's commonly known as the balance sheet, which presents organisational assets and liabilities. The fourth is the Statement of Changes in Taxpayers' Equity. This report effectively presents the changes in taxpayers' interests in the organisation, equity being the balances of assets and liability, and the final is the statement of cash flows for the period ending 31st of March 2024. So one final area to highlight within the accounts to the committee is the progress the accounts team has made in securing agreement with Welsh Government for a small, but important for us, specific entry to provide the reader with more useful intelligence regarding DHW spend, and specifically address some of the issues in classifying a significant proportion of our spend that's previously been classified as premises. This can be seen in the middle of note 3.3, which now includes the heading, computer software licenses and maintenance for DHW to use. This is a staggering 45.326 million for our organisation. And this item is also reflected in the ISA 260 as part of the adjustments within the notes. And finally, for the committee, I would like to highlight the contribution not only from the wider organisation, but from Mike, David and the team at Audit Wales in making this the most successful, most efficient exercise, enabling us to meet our accelerated target for completion of the accounts this year.
Thank you, Sian. We're all getting a bit emotional, isn't it? It's the end of the school term. And thank you for all your efforts. Yes, thank you, Marion. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Claire. I can see that Ruth has her hand up.
Thanks, Marion, and thanks, Claire. I mean, you know, have the rest of the week off, right? I think it is so good to see how good your forecasting is. You know, over the years, it's just got better and better. Also, the changes that are made for us as DHCW to be able to be more specific about the information that we put in there. I know these are things that as an audit committee we've picked up on in previous years, that actually the wider process isn't necessarily most helpful for DHCW. So all the work that you guys have done with Audit Wales as well to get us to this position, I think, you know, I'm in awe, and thank you is all I wanted to say on that.
Thank you, and I think that Ruth's comments echo all our feelings around the table. But before I take any more comments or observations, I propose that we take the ISA 260 report, which is agenda item 5.3, including the letter of representation and audit opinion. It's included for the committee's information and to support our consideration of the annual accounts. The detailed plan was circulated to the committee. Comments received have been taken into account, we are assured. So I'll invite Mike Whiteley, who is joined by David Tomlin from Audit Wales, to present the audit of the financial statements report, which the committee is being asked to receive for assurance. Diolch, Mike.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. I'm kind of got quite an act to follow in terms of Sian and Claire's summary of the account, so I'll do my best, and I'll try and keep it brief, which I think I can do, given the really positive outcome of the report. So I'll do the usual kind of summarise the key points, so if that's okay, assume the report's been read, and then happy to take any questions at the end. You know, I think it's important at this point for David and I and the team to kind of express our gratitude to Claire, Sian, Mark and the wider finance team, and also colleagues we've had engagement with on kind of project leads for various things that have appeared in the accounts, just in terms of their cooperation and support throughout the audit. And as Claire says, it's gone really smoothly this year, which I think is a big achievement. You know, we did make some recommendations in our report last year, which were taken very seriously, you know, and happy to confirm that, you know, all actions have been made there. So a really positive audit from our perspective this year. Moving on to the report, on page 6, there's a helpful your audit at a glance summary. And in there, that contains the two main messages, I think, you know, for members I'd like to draw out. One, that we're proposing to give an unqualified opinion on the accounts. And two, that there's no significant issues to report. You know, that's a really positive outcome for the audit and reflects the good quality draft accounts that we received supported by comprehensive working papers, which makes our life a lot easier. We don't take that for granted, because we certainly don't get that on all of our audits across Wales. Moving on to page 7, there's a change. Just wish to draw to your attention regarding auditor independence. So this is a change since the audit plan was issued. So in there, we've got an additional threat to our independence, which has only occurred very recently, over the last month or so, I believe, and also just to confirm that it's not impacted on our audit of the accounts, and that appropriate safeguards are in place going forwards. Moving on to page 10, there's a very brief but quite an important sentence in there which confirms that there are no non-trivial uncorrected misstatements in the accounts. So this means that for all of our audit findings where we found misstatements, those have been corrected. Appendix 1 contains our proposed audit report. As has already been outlined, we intend to give the unqualified opinion on the financial statements once the accounts have been approved and we receive the signed letter of representation, which is in our report, and also item 5.1 on today's agenda. Just to clarify as well, the opinion at this stage is technically proposed. We haven't given that opinion just yet. It's proposed until the Auditor General certifies the accounts, which is scheduled for Friday. And finally, I annoyed with myself because I spotted a typo in this yesterday. It is Appendix 3, even though it says Appendix 4. I was battling the gremlins with the headers and footers in our template, so that's on me. I'll make sure it's right next year. So Appendix 3 is the summary of the corrected misstatements that we've identified in the accounts. There's nothing there specifically I wanted to bring to members' attention, but I am happy to take any questions on those or any other aspects of our report. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that excellent summary and your proposed unqualified opinion, which is very, very pleasing to note. The fact that we've been able to meet our accelerated target this year, I think, is testament to the excellent working relationship between Claire, Sian, Mark and the team, and yourselves at Audit Wales. And you referenced the recommendations that we took forward last year. That was that lessons learned audit, which clearly have been acted upon and has brought us to this very, very positive position which we find ourselves in. I can't see any hands up, but obviously there's so much positivity here, very clear and positive and helpful reports. I'd just like to end by saying that I don't think any of us have been in such a positive position in terms of receiving the year-end financial accounts. For the record, we are being asked to note and endorse to the board the annual accounts for 23-24, including the financial statements, the letter of representation, and we recommend, therefore, that it is approved by the DHCW's board prior to submission to Welsh Government tomorrow, the 10th of July, which is part of the required annual reporting for the last financial year. So are we happy to endorse it to the board? I think we are. So my thanks once again to Claire and the team and to colleagues from Audit Wales. It's a hugely positive step forward, even from the positive position we found ourselves last year. So our thanks to you all for collaborating on what is a very positive year-end position. Diolch yn fawr I bawb. So we will move on then and back to agenda item 5.2, which is the accountability report and performance report. And as part of the annual reporting cycle required by Welsh Government, we are required to submit our annual report, which includes the accountability report following the commencement of the new financial year. And as with the annual accounts, the Audit Committee are required to endorse the annual accountability report and the performance report. So I will now invite our Board Secretary, Chris Darling, to present the report which we are being asked to note and endorse. Chris, diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, and tough act to follow. I need to start by just saying there is taking a leaf out of Mike's book. There's a couple of typos Sean picked up yesterday evening. So page 121, 122, 123, the financial year 22-23 needs to change to 23-24. So we're making that change. It's always the final read through, isn't it, that you pick up on a couple of last minute things. Just start by thanking all those involved across the organisation who contributed to the annual report, led by Laura, but with significant impact from colleagues across the organisation, Audit Wales, Welsh Government, and internal audit. So we are, as a Special Health Authority, required to submit our annual report to Welsh Government following the commencement of the new financial year. So today we have the annual report for endorsement by the committee. It will then go to the SHA Board extraordinary meeting this afternoon. If approved there, will be signed by the Chair, Chief Executive, and we will hold our AGM as planned at the end of July, on the 25th of July. In terms of the makeup, we have adhered to the Manual for Accounts guidance. We have one unified document, 3 parts, the annual report and the accounts, incorporating the performance report and the accountability report. The performance report provides information on the organisation, our objectives, strategies, and the principal risks we face or faced during 2024. And there is an overarching requirement for the annual report and the accounts to be fair, balanced, and understandable. So as a committee, we're endorsing that, to the best of our knowledge, that is the case within the information set out. The accountability report meets 3 key requirements of Welsh Government. So the corporate governance report, the remuneration staff report, and the National Assembly for Welsh Accountability and Audit report. So just to confirm to colleagues, you obviously saw previous draft a couple of months ago. Significant work has taken place over the last 2 months, working with Audit Wales and Welsh Government in particular to address comments, recommendations, and those are now reflected in the final report that's here in the papers today. And I'll just invite Laura in to just comment on next steps in terms of taking the report forward.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody. So, yeah, just as per the Chapter 3 guidance, so we have to produce the annual report as a single unified document in a PDF. But the same approach we took to last year, we've allowed for a bit more accessibility, and as a digital organisation, we've produced the annual report in a HTML format alongside the PDF. So once it's been signed and everything, the HTML will be published and promoted. And just to say, you know, publishing it in this way for us as an organisation is a really great tool to explain to our stakeholders who we are and what we do, and track our interest on the HTML. So last year we did have 2,500 views on it, and we've been able to look at what the stakeholders are most interested in. So using this information and intelligence we had last year, we've included more short videos, links and click-throughs into this year's report. So it'll be interesting then to analyse what's been of most interest this year. And probably just to echo what Chris has said, it really is a joint effort. I'm really grateful for you know, Sean, the graphics team, Nathan sent through a really helpful checklist on, you know, looking from an Audit Wales perspective, and then also Dave from Audit Wales. We've been making sure we're all lined up to hit the timescales, which have been a little bit tight this year. So yeah, really grateful and looking forward to getting it promoted more widely, I think, across NHS Wales. So thank you.
Diolch, Laura, and thank you, Chris. And can I just then, yeah, I can see a couple of hands up. So we'll start with Alistair, if I may. Alistair?
Thank you, Marianne. It's partly been answered, I think, by Laura just there. But in terms of achieving an objective view of our relationship with stakeholders and key partners, clearly looking at the number of clicks on our report is part of that. But do we have any more to be able to say objectively that we have a strong relationship, a strong engagement with our partners, our key partners, and our stakeholders? Thanks.
Do you want me to respond, Chair, on that one?
Yes,
So
please,
I think I think the annual report is one of a number of mechanisms we can use. So it's really helpful in terms of telling us what some of our stakeholders want to see more of. But things like our website, we know that our recruitment page gets a lot of activity. So we know that we're getting interest from potential future employees, as it were. And the work we're doing that we mentioned earlier with Atos, I think that's probably the most significant bit of work where we've proactively gone to stakeholders and partners that we work with, asked them for their views and opinions in an independent way. So we are one step removed, if you like. The reason we used Atos was to make sure people were comfortable talking to someone independently. And I think the feedback from that will really give us some rich insight into the views, opinions, ways that stakeholders want to engage with us, that some of the things that we do well, some of the things that we probably need to improve on. So I think there's a range, and I'd like to think the annual report is one of the mechanisms. It's probably, along with, well, it's our most public facing document. It's obviously a backward look, but it is an important mechanism and tool for us, I think.
Diolch fawr, Chris. Thank you for that. I'll now turn to Claire, if I may, Claire.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point of saying that actually there's a hell of a lot of work that goes into the background of putting this document together. This year, I hope you will feel that it's far more numeric. We've tried consciously to put some more numbers behind the products that we service in Wales, but also to try and bring it more to life. And I think it's a credit to the work that goes on behind the scenes with Laura and the team, coordinating this and making sure it really brings together and sings as one document at the end and as a common thread through it, which is I know is really challenging to achieve. So I think it looks really great. It will be interesting to see, actually, given Alistair's point, how many hits we get on this. But I think if anyone wanted to come and understand the organisation in a nutshell, this would be a really good document to point to, because it covers everything for quite thoroughly, but also in quite an engaging way. So we've used a lot more pictures, we've used a lot more numbers. So I think this is, again, a great step forward. It'll be interesting to see how Laura's going to beat this next year, but a fantastic insight, I think, into DHCW's 2023-24. Well done.
Diolch, Claire, and no pressure then, Laura, no pressure at all for next year. And then let me turn now then to Nathan Couch, Audit Wales. Nathan?
Thanks, Chair. It was just to build on what Chris's response was to Alistair there, that we're going to be doing a review of stakeholder engagement arrangements at DHCW later on in the year. Clearly that will just look at the arrangement, but also I think we'll be speaking to some of DHCW stakeholders as well, and looking to weave the comments from them back into the report. So that's just another source of assurance from that respect.
Thank you, Nathan, for clarifying that. Indeed, it is that extra source of assurance, which we'll look forward to getting later in the year. And then finally, Marilyn.
Thank you, Chair. And as I said, thank you for all the work that's gone behind it, Chris, Laura, and the teams behind it. I just want to say around the stakeholder issue, Nathan, to perhaps in next year actually having a look at the stakeholders we've dealt with in the past, and perhaps identifying whether there's other stakeholders what we perhaps need to engage with, or opportunities when we collaborate with them in pointing them towards this, because such a lot of work has gone into it, and I think we're much clearer about what we're trying to achieve, so that they can give us some feedback on what they think that perhaps there's relationships we could exploit in the future with it. So I think that when we do some joint working, perhaps use this document as more in the future to actually tell people about what we've done, because I think that for me, who's been in the board for a couple of years, I don't actually think that we tell external organisations enough about what's going on behind the scenes. I think that that's something which would be more valuable to do in the future. So diolch yn fawr for all the hard work, and I just wanted to mention that. So.
Diolch, Marilyn. Thank you, and thank you all for your contributions, your comments, and your feedback. I mean, I think it is a fantastic document, for want of a better word. It's visually very, very engaging and attractive, and I think we've come along leaps and bounds, actually, when you compare with our first annual report 3 years ago. We really have come on, and I think, as Marilyn has said, it is a fantastic tool and vehicle for demonstrating who we are, what we do, because as a relatively new organisation within the NHS Wales family, I think we are continuing to raise our profile, and this is a great vehicle and tool for helping us to do that, and we need to maximise the potential of that opportunity. Really welcome the accessible format, which I think is really positive. I'd just like to reiterate our thanks as a committee. I won't begin to name names because I'm sure to leave someone out, but what is striking above all else is the strength of the teamwork that's been across the various teams within DHCW that's been involved in developing this document. It's a huge amount of work. It looks very streamlined, it looks very clean, and the numbers behind it, I think, help provide that extra assurance for us, the clarity. But it is a huge amount of work, and on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank everyone who's involved in delivering what is a great piece of annual report. So to bring this discussion to a close, and formally for the record, we are being asked to endorse the final version of the annual report, which has seen drafts previously, and to recommend its approval by the board prior to submission to Welsh Government on the 10th of July as part of the required annual reporting for the last financial year. Are we happy to supply that endorsement? Thank you. That is endorsed then. That brings me to the end of part 5 of our agenda. We are slightly ahead of time, which is always a good place to be in. So I propose, therefore, that we take a break now then, and suggest we come back at 11:10, if you're happy with that. That gives us a 15-minute break. Diolch yn fawr, colleagues, and thank you again to Audit Wales colleagues for joining us this morning, and for your very valuable input and insight. Diolch yn fawr. We'll see you back at 11:10 in 15 minutes. Yeah. Croeso nôl gyfeillion, welcome back, colleagues, and we will now move on to part 6 and 7 of today's meeting. And in this first section, we will be focusing on governance. So I shall invite Claire Osmondson-Little, our Executive Director of Finance, who's joined by Sian Williams, who's Head of Financial Service Reporting, and they're going to take us through the finance update. So over to you.
Thank you. So there's 2 parts to this financial update. The first of which Sian is going to take us through the high value and cumulative orders report. And then once Sian's done that, I'm going to take you through a bit of an update on DHEW's preparations for the Procurement Act. So I'll hand over to Sian first, if you could run through the report. Thanks, Sian.
Thanks, Claire. So I'm presenting agenda item 6.1, high value purchase orders report. The purpose of this report, as the committee will know, is to provide an update in relation to high value purchase orders over 0.750 million, excluding VAT. The relevance of the threshold is consistent with the scheme of delegation. The report also details instances where cumulative order values to suppliers have amounted to over 0.750 million during the financial year. So 4.1, during the period 1st of April 2024 to 17th of June 2024, there were 4 high value orders of more than 0.750 million raised. The details of all these orders are given in Table 1 and within Appendix A. So the 4 orders, I'll just talk through these. The first is for computer hardware purchases. So we brought a paper around leasing of GP PCs, and this order is in relation to that for GPs. The second is in relation to the vaccination programme and the Gov Notify platform with the Cabinet Office. The third is for the HB managed print-based contract, which is for GPs within GP surgeries, the supply of prints. And the final one is for the All Wales Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. If I move on now to suppliers whose cumulative orders for the year have reached over the 0.750 million threshold, there are only 2 suppliers, and they are shown in Table 2, which is In Practice Systems for document data extract for GPs, and TPX Impact for the supply of work packages for WCCIS and COVID. For completeness, we consolidate and the details in Appendix A and B to show all suppliers where spend has exceeded 0.750 million. And they are the 6 suppliers I've already talked about in the earlier part of the report. So not much to note. We've only got the first 2.5 months of the year in this report. And that's the conclusion of the report, Claire.
Thank you, Sian. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions. If not, I'll move on to our update on the Procurement Act. Okay, so I would like to thank Julie Francis, who's getting me fit ready for the Procurement Act that's coming into force in October of this year. And really, I just wanted to touch on some of the highlights to inform the committee, because obviously our next meeting is in October and we should be up and running and complying with the Act at that point. And the ethos of the Act is really to demonstrate value for money, public benefit, greater transparency and integrity at the heart of the procurement systems. But it's also a modernisation and unifying of procurement systems and processes. The objectives of the Act were to create a fairer system that works better for both suppliers and for buyers, and to create more flexibility, to have freedom to better design their procurement processes, but allow public procurement to be much more open for new entrants such as small businesses and small enterprises, and increase competition across all markets. Transparency is really fundamental to this throughout the process, so that the taxpayers' money can be really scrutinised in far more detail than it currently is. So the Procurement Act changes, the main changes centre around a new tendering procedure, greater transparency regarding the information and the way it's published. The standstill period, time and the scope has changed. There's mandatory and discretionary grounds for exclusion, and there's more disclosures as part of that process. So the consequences for DHEW will really be a more efficient and a more earlier planning of procurement and contracting activities to really embrace and take into account all of those requirements. So we have been doing quite a bit of work at DHEW to get ready for this Act. The commercial team themselves undertook some training in April, and they've reviewed our policies and procedures, and actually are now working more closely with the directorates to ensure compliance with those procedures. They have developed and led a new training plan, and also they've done updates and team talks across the organisation, and they're looking to do a board development session shortly to bring the board fully on board with the content of the Act. So we've still got wider stakeholder training to undertake, and we've got to finalise some of our processes and procedures. What we've done and what Julia's led is we've got 2 key subject matters experts within the commercial services team, Matthew Perrett, who centres around procurement, but also Rachel Stirrup, who's doing contract management. And they have had training themselves, but have also been rolling out training and will be rolling out training more broadly to the organisation between now and October. So, like I've said, we are now ensuring that we're ready for that October deadline. We've looked at our current and pipeline of agreements so that we can be ready to ensure compliance with the Act. And again, that really centres around looking at our current processes, looking at our standard operating procedures, training and guidance documentation, and really understanding and bringing to light the changes of the new Act. So between now and October, we will continue to do that, to continue that improvement in our governance processes, but also in our training and communication. And again, that will inform the future board development session as well. So that's really just to raise awareness that we have got a change and a compliance with the forthcoming Procurement Act. There is implications for DHEW. We need to get match fit, and we're working on that with the relevant training and processes that we're bringing into play. And going forward, we'll be able to demonstrate compliance through the necessary processes to the audit committee going forward. So, Marion, that was the only update from finance for noting this month.
That was very, very helpful indeed, Claire, to bring us up to speed with the implications of the Procurement Act. And from the update you provided, it seems that we are in a good place to meet the requirements of the Act when it comes into force in October. Can I check whether there are any questions or comments from colleagues? Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just a comment, really. When I joined DHW, I think one of the things that struck me was the importance of commercial services, the role of the supply chain within digital. So I think this is vitally important for us, the implications of the Act. And, you know, we've got a really strong commercial services team, and I think that's really important. I think the education around the Act, as Claire mentioned, leading up to its implementation is really important. But yeah, it's certainly one of the things I think when I joined that I remember thinking, wow, this is a massive part of the operation of the organisation. So it was just that comment.
Thank you, Chris. And anything indeed that allows us to have more open competition can only be good, particularly in this challenging financial environment. So thank you, Claire, and thank you, Sian, for your finance update, which we note, and we'll move on then to agenda item 6.2, which is on quality and regulatory compliance. And I will now invite Paul Evans, who's Head of Quality and Regulatory, to present the Compliance Update Report, which we are being asked to approve along with the annual quality report. So you'll take one after the other, presumably, Paul. Diolch.
Diolch, Marilyn. I've actually combined the duty of quality report into my usual update because, as usual, I've arranged it into themes, duty of quality being one of those. But I'll start off with audit. So the external audits for the last quarter have been split within my report only because we had one brought forward on a later schedule, and I wasn't sure whether we'd get the report or not. But we have actually had that report. So the two audits during the quarter for ISO 27001 and ISO 20000. I'm pleased to report that the ISO 20000 audit had no non-compliances raised and just one minor non-compliance for 27001. There were a small number of opportunities for improvement across both the audits. Nothing of any note really, but all the opportunities for improvement and the non-compliance have been logged onto iPassport and have been addressed by the relevant teams. Currently, and I say that because of the late rescheduling of the 20000 audit, but currently there are no planned audits in Q2, but that may change. The risk-based internal audit programme continues to operate effectively, and at the end of Q1 we're showing 100% compliance with the plan. Excuse me, moving on to quality management. We continue to work with document owners to increase the percentage of documents within due date for review, and we have seen some improvements since last quarter and have achieved our 90% compliance target with the percentage currently sitting at 91%. But we continue to work with the remaining 9% to improve compliance there. Our non-compliances, as the committee are aware, are now being managed through iPassport, and we're getting some good feedback on users for the system. We've made some progress, but we're still well below our target percentage, currently reporting 76% in date for non-compliances. We'll put an action plan in place to have a real push on improving that. Moving on to legislation, we've made significant progress on the work for the medical device regulation compliance, and I'm pleased to report that the organisation are now in a position to take a medical device through conformity assessment under the existing UK medical device regulations, and we continue to work with the MHRA and other stakeholders in readiness for publication of the enhanced regulations later this year. There's still a significant amount of work to be done to meet the new regs, but we are at least in a position now to comply with the existing regulations. And we're progressing work towards certification for ISO 13485. We're actually starting a 3-day external audit today in readiness for that push for certification. Then moving on to the duty of quality, as you mentioned, 6.2i is the first annual report. It's been a challenging time over the past year, just interpreting the duty of quality requirements for a digital, non-patient facing organisation, but the team have made some really good progress, and Welsh Government have got an iterative development stance on the reporting, so it kind of goes hand in hand with the work the team have been doing. The report itself has been produced with the aim of providing assurance on how DHCW is complying with the duty of quality, and the layout of the report follows the guidance within Welsh Government statutory guidance document, which identifies key areas for inclusion in the report. Things such as a statement from the Chief Exec and the Chair, steps the organisation is taking to comply with the duty, key strategic decisions taken and how the duty of quality informed them, any achievements and assessments of improvement, and a look forward to some quality priorities and ambitions. So just to touch on a few of the key areas in the report. The report documents our completion of the Welsh Government roadmap and our involvement in Welsh Government's duty of quality reference group, and highlights some of the improvements that we've made as an organisation, such as the board development session to brief the board on responsibilities around the duty, the development of quality impact assessment toolkit, which will be rolled out as this year progresses. It's been approved by execs now. Inclusion of the health and care quality standards into all board and committee report papers, introducing quality business partners to the organisation to work with the directorates on improving their quality position, our continued accreditation to our ISO and British standards, and publication of our always on reports, and also a publication of a number of strategies and frameworks across the organisation linking business as usual processes to duty of quality requirements. And just a brief look forward to next year. The report includes a list of quality priorities, a key one being duty of quality workshops across all directorate SLTs. All but one directorate now has those planned in by the end of this quarter, and we're working closely with the remaining directorate to get that date booked in. And the use of iPassport and the approval of the document management strategy have been key developments, and we'll continue to progress that work over the next year. And as expected, this year's report contains very little around quality improvement because we spent this year identifying where we are as an organisation and benchmarking that. But next year's report will have a much deeper focus on the quality improvement requirements of the Act. Just moving on to our IMTP milestones. The quality team had 3 milestones for Q1. 2 were fully achieved. The one that wasn't, unfortunately, is the duty of quality report. We put it in as a Q1 milestone, but because of the dates of this committee and the SHA board, it's fallen into Q2. But obviously, the report is complete and is published in these papers. And just finally, some key activities for the team as we move forward into the next quarter. As I've mentioned, we've got the duty of quality workshops to complete, and they will be completed by the end of Q2. Further rollout of some quality improvement training in line with another IMTP milestone. So we have to date completed toolkits and training programs for DMAIC, Define, Measure, Analyse, Improve and Control, and FMEA, which is Failure Modes Effects Analysis. So those toolkits are now currently available, and in the next quarter I'll be developing a 5-minute improvement program and looking at PDCA, Plan to Check Act cycles and Gemba walks. I will be finalising the product-based quality framework this week and sending to Claire for a review. The WIAG Power App, just to note, has now gone live. So we're hoping to see some improvements in the WIAG process because of that. And we continue with our critical evaluation of the risk-based internal audit programme to try and build some AI into that programme to conduct cross-clause analysis. That's the end of my summary, so I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Diolch, Paul. Thank you. Can I can see Laura wants to come in. Diolch, Laura.
Diolch, Marion. It's just a small comment, really. So, duty of quality is new for us as an organisation, and it's quite important, the education around it. So, we're working with the quality team. We're capturing what report authors are saying are their duty of quality enablers and domains in their, impact assessment of all the board and committee reports. And then we plan to, review that information, because that will then help us identify where people might need a bit more education on which domain is relevant. And then that will hopefully as well help support embedding duty of quality into all of our board and committee business going forward. So I think it'll be a useful thing. Paul and I have got it planned for later on once we've got a few more come through. But I think the education piece around this is really important for us as an organisation.
Diolch, Laura. Chris?
Diolch, Chair. Yeah, Paul won't be surprised to hear me say it. I'm really enjoyed hearing the focus on quality improvement going into next year. I do think for our organisation there can be huge benefit, and so I guess the question for Paul is, in terms of resourcing and rolling out the training, seeing projects being started, delivered, fed back, understanding the impact. Do you think we're resourced to be? Are you resourced to be able to do that? Because I do think this is where we could add significant value through the focus on quality.
It's a difficult one to answer, Chris. I mean, as we stand, the team is certainly resourced to develop the training and provide the training, and we're in a position to coach and handhold to a degree teams through a quality improvement cycle. The intention there is that, as we build experience and expertise within teams, that they'll be able to run their own quality improvement cycles with just some oversight from the quality team. If the organisation really buy into quality improvement and all of a sudden we've got 100 different suggestions for large quality improvement episodes, then resource would naturally be challenging. But I expect it to be a gradual uptake as people see the benefits of it, and if it is, as I suspect, then we'll build further expertise across the directorates in the use of these tools as we go.
Diolch, Paul, and thanks, Chris, for raising that. is clearly an important development, and from what you've outlined, there's an awful lot of activity going on to engage. You talked about the 10 talks, the engagement workshops, on a scale of, sort of 8 to 10. My first question is what is our state of readiness for meeting the duty of quality going forward? And I guess the big challenge is to embed quality in everything that we do. And I guess the other challenge is to get a definitive baseline in terms of how we measure progress going forward. Perhaps you could give me a bit of detail around establishing that baseline so that we can effectively measure progress going forward.
Yes, of course, Marion. So I mean,
Yeah.
this is effectively what the SLT workshops are there to do. We want to work with each of the directorates and starting at SLT level, but happy to roll that down to a team level if required, as we're doing within Claire's own directorate. We are taking a team by team approach, but the idea of the workshops is really to get get staff to tell us how they feel their business as usual processes meet each of the quality domains and enablers. So what does safe look like from a corporate governance perspective? What does timely look like from a clinical informatics perspective? It's getting the teams to really get their heads together and think and tell us what their baseline is, because what we're aiming to do is to be able to measure all those business processes against the 12 quality standards, and get the message across the teams that actually, if what you're aiming for is 90%, but you're only at 50% currently, that is absolutely fine. That's your baseline. Then we'll look at one of the quality improvement tools to get you to the point where you want to be, and also that you may not get there in one quality improvement cycle. It may take 3, 4, 5 cycles to get you to your ultimate target, but as long as we're demonstrating progress, then that meets the requirements of the duty of quality.
Thank you, Paul. That's really very helpful. Chris, you want to come back on this?
Yeah, it's just to pick up the point around quality improvement. So a lot of the health boards have a big focus on this, but mainly through the lens of patient safety. But I think the tools that Paul's described, DMAIC, PDSA cycles, are just as relevant to us. So yeah. I'm really keen. One of the metrics I'd like to see is the number of structured QI projects undertaken over the course of the year from start to finish. What have we learned from them, and get some of that feedback, because where that's happened, I think in a health board context, it really has made a difference culturally to kind of the organizational learning around patient safety. I think I know Paul does a lot of linking in with colleagues from other settings, but I think there's a lot we could probably pick up from that. Yeah,
absolutely agree, Chris, and that is the intention. And in some ways, I've gone about it a little bit backwards. I've developed the DMAIC framework because I see a lot of value in DMAIC. But the thing I've started working on now is this 5-minute improvement program, as I mentioned. It's something Welsh Blood Service have adopted, and happy for us to build something on the back of. I think the difference in the two approaches is DMAIC is going to target quite large quality improvements that they need a small group focus on it, but the 5-minute improvement program is something that I hope to roll out across the entire organisation, and the message will be along the lines of what in your day-to-day bugs you that you can suggest something to do about it, and by engaging the wider organisation in those 5-minute improvements, hopefully it'll build an appetite for the larger DMAIC PDCA type projects. But certainly we'll report in metrics on both of those moving forward.
Yeah, Paul, that's really very helpful. And just to echo your words, you just highlighted how challenging the last 18 months have been in terms of getting us to this point and to produce the first annual quality report. So thank you very, very much for not only your presentation today, but all the hard work involved. And what you've given us is a level of assurance that we're on course, certainly, to meet the expectations of the duty of quality. And so thank you. So we are being asked as a committee to note your up-to-date report, and crucially, we're being asked to approve the annual quality report, which clearly reflects a huge amount of work over the last 18 months. Are we happy to approve the report, colleagues? I think that's very clear. So diolch yn fawr, Paul. Thank you again for your work and your leadership on this.
Diolch, Marian.
We will move on then to agenda item 6.3 and the Estates Decarbonisation and Compliance Report. It's my pleasure now to invite Julie Ash to present this report, which we are being asked to note. Julie, diolch.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, just a couple of general updates. Very pleased to present the Estates Decarbonisation and Compliance Update. From a general perspective, just to say that we have now a well-established Estates Development Group, which is very helpfully chaired by Chris, so that's proving extremely useful, particularly noting some of the developments we're looking at, but I'll come on to the detail of that in a bit. Just to confirm that we submitted our narrative decarbonisation return under the NHS performance framework on time, and we're currently working on our emissions return, which is due to be reported by the beginning of September. So we're all on target for that as well. So just to pick up some bits under estates development. Hopefully people will be aware we're looking at redevelopment of the ground floor of T Glanarfon to provide a conferencing facility as well as some space for user-centred design and digital inclusion. So as part of that, we've actually relocated staff now from the ground floor to floors 2, 4, 5 and 6 of the building. So that's been successful. So we now have a clear space going forward. So we're working on a concept design, which I'm pleased to say has now been finalised. There's more detail to be added to that. So we'll be engaging with an architect and cost advisors to take that forward. But there's really good work and progress going on in that area. We are continuing to look at modernisation of the estate. Repurposing existing furniture and equipment, and looking to redesign space where we can to allow for more flexible working. Estate rationalisation, I think we did refer to that briefly under decarbonisation. We are intending to do a little more of that by surrendering our lease at the ground floor of Castlebridge 2, which is a building next to T Glanarfon. So we've now moved all of our staff out of there as well. So we're well in preparation for that. The lease ends in March 2025. So as well as rationalisation, we'll see some cost savings there. Just on leases, we've received a proposal for a new lease at T Glanarfon, which would run from the 1st of April 2025. So we've had a few meetings with the landlords and our colleagues in Shared Services Estates to take that forward. As part of that proposal, we are able to request works in lieu of a rent-free period. We have exercised that option and asked the landlord to install a ramp to improve accessibility into the building. My colleagues will probably be aware that at the moment there's a lift there which isn't ideal. So we're looking to get that work completed this financial year. We've also reached agreement with the Welsh NHS Confederation to share our space in T Glanarfon. They will be taking up occupation and a licence on the 31st of July. So again, that's all good news and progressing well, going further towards estate rationalisation. We've also reached agreement to share some of our space in Mould, additional space this is because we were currently letting out 2 desks, but we've now agreed for some further desks to be shared with the Joint Commissioning Committee and also the NHS Executive. So very positive there. The next section was on decarbonisation, which I think we've discussed in quite a bit of detail under the audit report, but just again to say that we very much welcomed that audit report and the recommendations which we'll take forward. And finally, just on to environmental and compliance. So overall compliance of plant systems and equipment is 99%. So that's well ahead of our target of 90%. And internal planned preventative maintenance remains at 100%. So I've actually included a diagram just to demonstrate that. Again, very positive, so well ahead of target on that note. And that was it, and very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Diolch, Julie. A very clear report, which I'm sure we all welcome. I'll open it out now for questions. And Alistair.
Yes, thanks for that. I just wondered if we are also encouraging our other offices to, where appropriate, to look at the potential for shared space in order to potentially offset some of our costs and potentially bring in some income if that is appropriate and where it might work.
Yes, Alex, there is the answer to that. We would welcome shared occupancy in any of our sites. So, yes.
Diolch, and it's really pleasing actually to hear about the progress on site rationalisation in both Castlebridge and Mould. And the board visited Mould last week, or was it the week before? And clearly there is a lot of space there, but really positive to hear that some of that space is being prepared for utilisation by colleagues outside DHCW. So well done on that. Chris, you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just on that point, really, just to say, I think Alistair's point's a good one, and it's very much the Welsh Government's direction of travel, public sector organisations sharing information, intelligence around use of occupancy, particularly, I think it's probably fair to say, since COVID, where occupancy levels are down. So we do have a number of mechanisms, and Julie's plugged into those, where we share information about office space we might have, office space other facilities have. One of the areas we've looked at is North West Wales. Mould is a great hub for us in North Wales, but we are aware that it's not necessarily close to those in the Northwest. So we have had dialogue with BCU around their office accommodation. I think, Alistair, this is probably something we're going to continue to do over the next year or two, because I think there's a lot of organisations who are working through what occupancy levels is right for them, how can they accommodate joint occupancy with partners, etc. So I think it's a really good question, and one that we're continuing to work on, it's probably fair to say. Julie might want to add to that though.
Thank you. Julie, would you like to come back?
Yeah, just quickly, Chair, if I could, just to say, as part of it was just to try and provide a little bit of reassurance, really. As part of the proposal to renew the lease in Tŷ Glan yr Afon, due to the value of the lease, we needed Welsh Government approval. And there was a bit of a challenge because it's well known that we're now working in a hybrid manner around had we considered other options, and very quickly the Minister was reassured by our rationalisation plans and the fact that we are starting to share our space. So it was just to provide a little bit of assurance to the committee.
Thank you, Julie. That's really helpful. Alistair.
Yes, thanks. Just for allowing me to come back briefly, Marianne, it's just really to point out that there inevitably is a direct linkage between this, our utilisation of space, and our core HR strategies around hybrid working. And I think it's just to make the point that there is an aspect of, do we drive the culture around that, or do we respond to the culture around that? And clearly in trying to develop over the short, medium, long term the appropriate use of our assets, that cannot be entirely responsive. It needs to look ahead, plan ahead, and therefore to a large extent get into the driving seat about that. And so I guess what that raises is the clear need in the reasonably short term for us as an organisation to be very clear about our ongoing approach into hybrid working and just what that the consequences of that on our assets. But thanks Marianne. It doesn't require response, but I just thought I'd make that connection.
I think that's a really valid point, Alistair. Thank you for making it. Marilyn? You're on mute.
So I just wanted to add to that, really. There's been some discussions by staff around whether or not they might increase the time in coming into the office. So I think that is a discussion that's being had along with the rationalisation, really, about office space. So I think that's something that's happening hand in hand. And like you said, it's not necessarily going to be a reactive response to what's happening. I think from an organisational point, I think they're happening hand in hand. It's just about perhaps at what pace that's happening is something for us to consider for the future, timescale wise.
Diolch, Marilyn, and thank you all for your comments on that. So unless there are any other comments, then we are being asked to note the estate's decarbonisation and compliance report, and just like to welcome as well the that we're well above targets in a number of those areas which you've highlighted, Julie. So it's pleasing to see that progress, pleasing indeed. Diolch yn fawr. So we will move now onwards to agenda item 6.4, which is the corporate risk report. And I'd like to call upon our Board Secretary, Chris Darling, to present the update on this report. Diolch, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. And just wanted to start, the committee has a responsibility for the oversight of risk and internal control across the HCW. So I was just going to reflect on the introduction of the Programmes Delivery Committee. We have a committee assignment approach to risk, and just reflect a number of the risks previously assigned to predominantly digital governance and safety, but a couple to this committee have now got the oversight through that committee structure. And I think that's working well in terms of the focus on programmes through that committee. There are two current risks assigned to the Audit and Assurance Committee that are included in the papers today. So I'm just going to start with a focus on those. The first one is 0313, the digital cost pressure risk, and the second one is 0331, fixed term resource funding risk. So if I start with the digital cost pressure risk, we had a recent discussion at Risk Management Group a week or so ago, had a good update from Mark Cox, who's can't be here today, but on this risk in particular. And you'll note that the risk scores reduced from 16 to 12, and this should come off the risk register over the next month or so. I think Mark and Claire just want to make sure everything's finalised before it does. So that's the position with that risk. In terms of 0331, the fixed term resource funding, audit committee members will be aware there are a number of staff employed within DHCW on permanent contracts who are funded through non-recurrent funding. From a staff perspective, they won't be aware of that. From an organisational perspective, we are aware of it, and we're just making sure we're monitoring through the strategic resourcing group chaired by our people and OD director how we're reducing that liability. So we're still in a situation where we get significant amount of short-term funding, and historically we have taken risks around we will go out permanently to attract the best caliber of applicant. There's a number of controls and processes in place through our scrutiny committee to make sure we really are scrutinising where we are taking those risks moving forward. So those were the two risks on there. I wanted to update the committee also on one further risk, which is 0332, sustainable major programme funding. So this is allocated to the Programmes Delivery Committee, but the discussion at Risk Management Group last week, we identified the need to, and we haven't done this yet, so I should caveat it with that statement, to split this out into one shorter term risk around funding for major programmes this financial year and going into next financial year, and a longer term sustainable funding risk for the organisation. I think they are two slightly different things, and we've probably come to a point where we've been starting to use those two risks interchangeably because of the landscape. So I think the as we define the long-term sustainable funding model risk, that will sit within this committee for oversight and assurance, and the short-term risks around major programme fundings will sit with the programmes delivery committee. I'll pause there, Chair. I'll just see if Claire wants to come in and add on anything to those, because they're mainly in her area.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you. Yeah. So this shows how live and agile our risk register really is. To be fair, so within the commercial market, we are still seeing pockets of digital inflation in some key areas that we are taking more of a national leadership role in to mitigate. So that's it's A, recognising, B, assessing it from a DHEW, but also from an NHS Wales perspective, and then it's working with our partners to resolve that and trying to drive more of a centralised once for Wales where the value can be leveraged. So that really tackles that one. And in terms of our ongoing funding for and balancing the risk around resourcing together with the funding around programmes, that we're trying to do that, linking it with our key areas of skills gaps. So it's really trying to identify where are the areas that we need to take risk because of the skills that we necessary for digital development, and where are the areas of potential opportunity to realign and retrain. So I think as we progress, I think September's a key deadline date for us, because it's really about where are we for next year and what is the inherent risk we're carrying forward. And that really sits in some of the programmes that are due to finalise in the year. So as per last year, the cancer programme, the WPAS move and the development programme. So then there are no surprises there, but it's really about proactively looking at those particular areas of concern and working out a way forward that is balancing the requirements of Welsh Government and the system, really. So yeah, it's an ongoing process, I think, at the moment, but it's all stuff that we're working with on a day-to-day basis collectively.
Thanks, Claire.
And Chair, the only thing I would add from a resourcing perspective is to be aware of the Welsh Health Circular log was included in the consent agenda. There was a Welsh Health Circular specifically around use of agency staff by NHS bodies. That has implications for us in a different way from health boards, who often use it to supplement their clinical staffing roster. We use it to supplement our work packages, if you like. So there's some actions linked to that Welsh Health Circular, which the strategic resourcing group are also working through as well.
Thank you, Chris. That's really very helpful. Just to go back to that resourcing issue and that challenge that we have, I think it'd be very helpful. You mentioned September being a key date with a number of programmes coming to that crucial sort of point. It'd be helpful at our next committee meeting to get a more detailed update on the changes in the risk regarding those programmes and the staff involved. And by October, you should have a better handle on the implications of that, I guess.
Yeah, that'll be perfect, because it leads into the IMTP planning assumptions and the funding requirements. So that fits really well. And by that time, we should have a clear position on many of those programmes.
Great, thank you. We'll include that on the agenda then. Thank you. Diolch, Chris, for that clear update on those changes in our risk register and the position as regards the risks that we manage as a committee. Can I ask colleagues whether you have any comments or feedback, questions? I don't think there is anything. So clearly, Chris, your detailed presentation, update and the clarity of the report has answered any queries that colleagues may have. So unless there are any other further comments, I propose that we note the corporate risk register update along with the risks assigned to this committee. Agenda item 6.5 next then, and that is the procurement and scheme of delegation compliance report. And I'll now ask Julie Francis to present the report which we are being asked to note. Julie,
Diolch, Marion. Bore da pawb. So I'd just like to bring to the attention of the committee 3 SDAs to a value of 2.6 million, 5 change controls outside the terms of their contractual agreements. All of those were completed and executed in accordance with standard financial instructions and procurement regulations, and they cover a range of our business requirements, including membership and accreditation to professional bodies, maintenance of existing services and technical support. Thank you.
Diolch, Julie. Any questions, comments? No, I can't see any hands up. So thank you for the clarity of your presentation. And the committee is pleased to note the procurement and scheme of delegation compliance report then. Diolch yn fawr. Which brings us nicely to the last substantive agenda item on today's business, which is agenda item 6.6 and the Welsh language report. And I'd like now to invite our Head of Corporate Governance, Laura Tolley, to present the Welsh language report, which updates us on the work undertaken since our last meeting and includes the finalisation of the Welsh language annual report. Laura, diolch.
Diolch, Marion. So, as always, it's a real pleasure to present our Welsh language report to this committee. And I'll just briefly highlight some key points in the report. So, committee members will notice that the report contains DHW's More Than Just Words annual report, and that outlines the actions that we're taking as an organisation to deliver the More Than Just Words action plan for the period September 23 to the end of March 24. And in addition, the report also includes our Welsh Language Commissioner annual report, which covers the period April 23 to March 24. So I'll take both of these reports as read. And just before I move on to the other aspects of the regular report, I'll just pause here, if I may, Chair, just for any questions or comments on these specifically before moving on, if that's okay.
Diolch, Laura. Can I ask colleagues whether they have any questions? Could I kick off then by asking specifically in terms of the More Than Just Words action plan, mwy na geiriau. There was a recommendation there that senior managers would undertake the training Welsh leading in a bilingual environment, I think is what it's called from memory. But your report highlights that there are no dates being offered by Academy Wales, which had piloted this course and was the key provider. I just wonder how what sort of workaround we're able to use if that course is not available. What are we doing to ensure that our senior leaders, especially those who are less familiar with the Welsh language and the bilingual nature of our nation, how are we ensuring that they are properly equipped with the understanding that is required?
Yeah, thanks, Marion. So it is something we have escalated. I think there's a resource issue in Academy Wales at the moment that they're working through. So we are hoping that there will be some dates coming forward in 24-25. But as a bit of a workaround, I suppose, that we are doing an Agor a Drws board development session for the board in collaboration with HEIW for later this year. And then we are linking, we do link in with Directorate SLTs routinely for Welsh language, and we do a lot of promotion on the importance of bilingualism across DHW anyway on a regular basis. So hopefully that answers that.
Great. My second question involves the development of the app, which is due to support colleagues in terms of defining the Welsh language skills requirement for different roles. Now I can see that the percentage of roles deemed Welsh essential has increased slightly from last year, but it's still very small. And I just wondered whether you think that the development of this app will help improve that position, or is it just a tool that is a technicality?
So I think it will help. I think before there was a tendency to just always select desirable. I think it was more of a cultural thing, whereas the app, yeah, it is a tool, but it does have specific questions around engagement, communication, correspondence, and so on, which does tend to result in more essential roles being identified across the organisation. So we would hope to see a natural increase the more that we do use it. I think the challenge is sometimes in recruitment. I think you'll see in the report later on, you know, there's a need to strengthen our Welsh language recruitment, and we are continuing to try and push that as much as we can. So I think it's the tool is there, but we also need the recruitment strategy to support the tool as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Laura, that's helpful. I think that's a bit all for me at this stage, and I can't see any other hands up. So let's proceed then to your update report.
Brilliant, thanks, Marion. So in terms of current Welsh language skills, so we have 44.43 staff with level 1 to 5 skills, and we have set an internal target of 60% for 24-25. It's quite ambitious, but you know, it's quite good to push yourself sometimes. But hopefully then this will support the more than just words action of achieving 100% of NHS staff having a courtesy level of Welsh. Completion of our Welsh language awareness course is now at 95%, so that's good. And then we have a small percentage of staff who haven't entered their skills on ESR, so 3.3%. So we are working with those directorates just to get those skills entered there. We have implemented a confidence building network across the HW, and we've also launched a mentoring scheme to pair Welsh language learners and speakers together to meet monthly, just to build their confidence so that staff make more use of their Welsh language skills at whatever level in the workplace. As I've mentioned, we continue to work with the People and OD team to increase our recruitment across the HW. And it would be remiss of me not to mention that we did have our first Welsh Language Learner of the Year award at our staff awards this year. I'm pleased to say that was Paul Evans, who's on the call today. So congratulations, Paul, on getting that one. But that was a really good to see that award in the staff awards this year. But that was all I was going to highlight from the regular side of the report. And as ever, happy to take any further questions, Marion.
Diolch Laura, ag gai fanteisio ar y cyfle yma I longyfarch Paul yn gynnes iawn. Llongyfarchiadau Paul, very pleasing to see the Welsh language being included in our staff awards this year, and also really positive to see a huge amount of work going on in this area. Before I've had a couple of questions myself, but I'll turn to Claire first of all. Claire?
I was looking through the report. There is a lot of amber and red in our annual plan with dates that we've clearly missed for whatever reason. I just wondered whether it would be useful to put the latest view on when we think we would turn those reds to ambers at the very least. And maybe we need to have a bit of focus on this in management board, to be honest with you. So there's clearly progress, and I'm absolutely delighted that Paul got the Learner of the Year. But I think there is, going through the report, there is quite a lot there that we perhaps need to review and put in a revised date of when we think we would be able to close some of those actions out, which may be of help then for the audit committee going forward, as to set the expectation of when we look like we'll be able to do that, given the resources we've got.
Yeah,
thank you for making that point, Claire. Yeah, I think there are a number of examples where targets have been missed and new target dates sort of bit of slippage there. I think it would be helpful to focus and to get the management board to look perhaps more closely at how they can assist us in delivering on some of these targets. We talked earlier about hybrid working and the journey of travel where we are, in terms of the number of people actually physically in the office. And culturally, this is a big, big change. And in terms of what we're doing to support the Welsh language, I'd just like to explore, sort of how much of a challenge this is. We've seen the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act coming in and impacting the Health Board earlier this month. We are expected, to support a thriving Welsh language. And I'd just like to hear a bit from you, Laura, and the team in terms of how challenged this will actually be for us, given that the mentoring scheme is being established. There's a lot of good work, but unless people are physically in the office hearing the Welsh language, I guess my concern would be how we effectively contribute to the expectation within the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act.
Yeah, thanks, Marion. So, the Generations Act, there is more emphasis on culture and sharing best practice. So we sort of operate as if we're under that act now, I suppose. So I, don't see a massive impact there. But I think you make a good point around the hybrid working. It is very difficult for us. And, when you're in the office, I love it when I'm in the office. I've got quite a few members of the team who speak Welsh, and you can just hear it throughout the office. And I do think that makes a big difference. And it's something that we spoke about at our Welsh language group before we launched the mentoring scheme. Is we sort of done a poll on, would people prefer that in person? Would they prefer it on Teams? So I think the thing at the moment we're looking at is once a month in person is encouraging. We do have a hybrid working policy that asks staff to go in 1 day a week. So trying to utilise that day a week to go in and, talk Welsh and see it across there. And then we are encouraging, the paned ysgwrs, so the cuppa and a catch-up in Welsh at different sites as well. So it's not just Cardiff based, across the HW offices, again, on site, coming in with purpose to really try and help us hear it more across the organisation. So it is a challenge. I think we've got a mix of things, hybrid, virtual only, or just face to face. And I think the more we do it, the more we'll learn from it and see what works well and what doesn't.
Diolch, Laura. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the points I was going to make, I think Laura's covered. I think that it is about a mix. I'm really fortunate hearing the team every week, sitting with them, and it does make a difference, doesn't it? It makes you more aware, and I think that's a big thing for us. I think this links back to some extent, Marion, into Alistair's question earlier about hybrid working. And for me, we've got 5 values, don't we? And our policy is 1 day a week in the office. And does that maximize our values and behaviors around inclusion, collaboration, innovation, etc., getting the balance right? I think we're still trying to work that out, and that's just as relevant for the Welsh language, I think, and how we encourage and promote that and interact with it. So I don't think it's an easy answer, and I think it's probably one we're still working through, but one we have got a particular focus on. There is a small subgroup, myself, a couple of others are looking at in terms of hybrid working, what that means for us as an organisation and what the balance is, right? Because we know it can be a contentious issue from a staffing perspective. We staff within DHCW have got used to post-COVID not being in the office 5 days a week, and I don't think we'll ever go back to that, but getting the right balance for a number of reasons, this being one, is important for us to continue to focus on.
Diolch, Chris, and helpful to understand a bit more about the focus on that subgroup and the way that the Welsh language could be considered within your considerations. Julie, your hand is up next.
Yeah, Thanks, Marion. It was just a little follow-up on hybrid working, really, and I think people will realise, but we do tend to try and encourage teams to come in together, so there is that interaction, and I concur with what Laura said. You know, when I've been in the office, I have heard some conversations in Welsh, which is always good to hear. And just a final bit of information is we will be moving to a new booking app shortly, whereby actually see who's going to be in which office on what floor. So this was something Helen was very keen on, to encourage that team working type approach. So it's just a bit on the culture that we're trying to create. Thanks.
Diolch, Julie, that's helpful. And then finally, Marilyn.
Diolch, thanks, Chair. Thanks for those comments. I just wanted to add that my Welsh is very tipping back, just a little bit of Welsh I have, but it's not just necessarily about speaking it, it's about understanding it. So if somebody was on a conversation, I could understand a lot more than I could actually respond to. So I think never underestimate just being in that environment and just being able to listen to it and immerse yourself in it. There's a huge value to that as well. So.
Diolch, Marilyn. It's a really important point, I think, and it just underlines the importance of allowing staff to hear the language and to give them the confidence to use it. And you've highlighted a number of interventions which hopefully will support DHCW with that process. Diolch, Laura. Thank you for your presentation. We are being asked as a committee to note the Welsh Language Report, which we do, and to approve the Welsh Language Annual Report for the last financial year for submission to the Welsh Language Commission. Are we happy to do that? Diolch yn fawr. And that brings us to closing matters, colleagues, then part 7, and the committee highlight report to board. There aren't, obviously we've got the extraordinary board meeting this afternoon, where we will hopefully be approving the final accounts. So we are being overtaken by events in that respect. I would like to highlight the funding priority recommendation that came from the internal audit on decarbonisation. I think that's something worth escalating. And then there's the Procurement Act and our readiness for the Act, which comes into being in October. I think that's worth escalating, as well as our first annual quality report under the duty of quality. Is there anything else that colleagues specifically would like us to escalate to board? It's a conversation we can have again outside this meeting then with further reflection. Okay, I can't see any specific hands up. So if you do have any other thoughts, do please get in touch. And finally, any other urgent business? I've not been advised of anything in advance of this meeting. Can I just check whether you have anything you want to flag up at this stage? I can't see any. So all that remains for me then is to thank the governance team for their support in enabling the effective running of this committee. There's been a lot of work involved with the annual accounts and the annual report, which we've discussed already, but I'd like to reiterate the committee's thanks to everybody for their involvement in delivering these papers, and thanks in particular to colleagues from Internal Audit and Audit Wales for your collaboration in this respect, which we very much appreciate. And to you colleagues, finally, thank you for your engagement throughout the meeting. The date of our next meeting is the 15th of October. Diolch yn fawr, and it's a pleasure to bring this meeting to a close. I can see Chris's hand briefly. Chris, do you have anything you want to flag up?
I just wondered if you wanted to start the next meeting at 12:30 rather than 12:40.
Good call. Let's do that.
Others are all ready, so we can if you want to.
Great, that's really helpful, Chris. So we'll reconvene at 12:30 for the private session of the Audit Committee. Diolch yn fawr gyfeillion. Thank you. See you soon.